You know that feeling that you are an option? Not the option, but one option among many. At work, on dating apps, even with that friend who only calls you when their plan A falls through. And the wildest part, you probably treat other people the same way. It's not on purpose. It's just that we live in a world where everything has become a menu. Don't like your job? Swipe. Didn't match with someone? Next. That restaurant disappointed you? There are 47 more on the app. And at some point, without noticing, people became part of this menu too. The problem is that this created something bizarre. Everyone feels like they can be replaced at any moment, and everyone at the same time is keeping an eye on other options. It's like an emotional game of musical chairs where no one wants to be the last one standing. But here's the real question. Do we actually believe that? Or is this just the way we've learned to function because everyone else functions like that? And what if the feeling of being replaceable is just a symptom of something much bigger happening? Let's take a few steps back because this story didn't start yesterday. There's been a massive shift over the last few decades, and we've kind of normalized it without really questioning it. Back then, the options you had in life were limited, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Think about it. If you lived in a small town, you knew X number of people. Your job options were Y. Your potential romantic partners were Z. It sounds restrictive, right? But there was something interesting about that. Within that limited universe, you were unique. You had a role. People knew who you were. I'm not romanticizing the past. I'm not saying it was better. I'm just pointing out a strange truth. Scarcity creates value. Now fast forward to today. You have access to literally billions of people. You can work remotely for companies anywhere in the world. You can meet someone on another continent and be talking to them in 3 seconds. It's amazing, right? Total freedom. But there's a side effect no one predicted. When your options are infinite, the value of each individual option plummets. It's basic supply and demand math applied to human relationships. And this is exactly where things get interesting. Because it's not just about you having more options. It's about you being one option among millions. So, that job you applied for, there are 500 people just as qualified. That person you're getting to know, they have 12 other matches happening at the same time. That client you serve, they can switch providers in 48 hours. And here's something fascinating. This isn't inherently bad. In theory, it should actually be liberating. After all, if everyone is replaceable, then no one has to carry the burden of being indispensable, right? You can leave a bad job. You can end a relationship that isn't working. You can start over whenever you want. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is the opposite. People are more anxious than ever, more insecure, more desperate to prove their worth. Because deep down, everyone has understood the new rule of the game. You are replaceable until you prove otherwise. And you have to prove that every single day. That's why you see people answering work emails at 11 p.m. That's why people are afraid to take vacations. That's why everyone is exhausted from trying to be the best version of themselves all the time. Because stopping means giving someone else the chance to take your place. And here's the interesting twist. This isn't a conspiracy. No one sat in a room and planned this. It was a natural consequence of building a world with an infinite abundance of choices. We solved one problem, lack of options, and created another, excess of options. And now everyone is trying to figure out how to navigate all this without losing themselves in the process. But then you might be thinking, wait, isn't this just about technology and social media? And yes, technology plays a massive role in all of this, but it's not the whole story. There's something deeper going on. Let's talk about how we measure value today, because that changed in such a radical way that almost no one even noticed. In the past, a person's value was tied to who they were, their reputation, their character, the stories people told about them. It took years to build that, and years to destroy it. It had weight. It had permanence. Today, value is tied to metrics. How many followers you have, how many likes you get, how much you produce, how fast you reply, your conversion rate, your LinkedIn score. And here's the problem. Metrics are comparable. You can literally put 2 people side by side and see who has the better numbers. And worse, these metrics change all the time. You can be at the top today and irrelevant tomorrow. Think about how many times you've caught yourself comparing. Not consciously, but that quick glance. So-and-so gets more likes than I do. That person got promoted faster. Their relationship looks happier than mine. We've turned human life into a competition of invisible metrics. And the prize? Not being forgotten. Now here's the interesting part. This shift affects areas we once thought were immune to it, like romantic relationships, for example. Have you noticed how even love has become a question of availability and timing? People say things like, I'm not in a place to date right now, or I don't have the emotional bandwidth for this, as if love were a portfolio decision, a matter of resource allocation. And I'm not judging. It actually makes sense in a world where everyone is overwhelmed, everyone is tired, everyone has 1,000 options. But there's something a little sad about it, isn't there? Because we always believed that some things, love, friendship, loyalty, were different, that they didn't follow market logic, that they weren't replaceable. But then you open a dating app and literally swipe people left or right based on, I don't know, a photo and 3 sentences. And if there's no chemistry after 2 dates, next. Because there are 50 more people waiting. And look, I'm not saying people should stay in bad relationships. Definitely not. But there's a difference between having the freedom to choose and treating people like testable products. What happened is that we imported consumer logic into every part of life, and consumption works like this: test, compare, replace. There's always something better. There's always an updated version, except people aren't products, and maybe that's exactly where the problem lies. Intellectually, we know that. But emotionally, in our day-to-day behavior, we act as if they were. You act like a product when you're constantly trying to sell yourself, when you hide your flaws, when you're afraid of being the outdated version, and you treat others like products when you're always scanning the horizon, always comparing, always thinking, is there something better out there? And so everyone gets stuck in this bizarre loop of being both consumer and product at the same time. Evaluating and being evaluated, choosing and being chosen, or worse, not being chosen at all. Now let's talk about something no one likes to admit. We actually kind of enjoy this logic, at least to a certain point, because think about it. Having options is good, right? Being able to change jobs if you're unhappy, being able to leave a relationship that isn't working, being able to choose where to live, who to connect with, how to live your life. That's freedom. And freedom is amazing. The problem is that we've confused freedom with the absence of commitment. And that's where things got complicated. There's a phrase that sums this up perfectly: keeping your options open. It sounds smart, strategic, but in practice, what does it really mean? It means never fully committing to anything, because commitment closes doors, and closing doors is scary. So you stay in that job that's just okay, but you don't truly dedicate yourself, because what if something better comes along? You stay in that lukewarm relationship without really giving yourself to it, because what if someone more interesting appears? You keep those surface level friendships without investing deeply, because hey, you might need networking someday. And here's the paradox: you do all of this so you won't be replaceable. But by refusing to commit to anything, you guarantee that you are replaceable in everything. Because here's the painful truth: you only become irreplaceable when you commit, when you dive deep into something, when you build history, when you're truly present. But that requires something everyone today is terrified of: vulnerability. Because committing is vulnerable. It's putting your chips on something with no guaranteed return. It's investing time, energy, emotions into something that might not work out. It's choosing someone and risking that they choose you back. And in a world where everyone can be replaced, who wants to be the fool who gives in first? It's like that game where 2 cars drive toward each other, and whoever swerves first loses. Except in this scenario, everyone is swerving, everyone is holding back, everyone has 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And then you end up with an entire generation of people who crave deep connection, but are terrified of connecting deeply, who want to be irreplaceable but don't want to do what it takes, which is choosing something and actually committing to it. There's an absurd irony in all of this. The most connected people in history are the loneliest. The people with the most options are the most indecisive. The people with the most freedom are the ones who feel the most trapped. And maybe the reason is exactly this: we're trying to have everything at the same time. Connection without vulnerability, importance without commitment, depth without risk. But that's not how it works. You can't be irreplaceable while keeping everything superficial. You can't build something meaningful if you're always eyeing the exit. You can't feel chosen if you yourself aren't truly choosing anything. And here's the craziest part: everyone knows this. Deep down, everyone understands that the problem isn't the options. The problem is the inability to choose. Because choosing one thing means giving up others. And giving up has become the new universal fear. We're so afraid of losing something that we end up losing everything at the same time. But what if we look at this from another angle? What if the feeling of being replaceable isn't just a problem, but also a symptom of something we haven't fully processed yet? Let's zoom out for a second. Our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, they lived in a time when things were more fixed. You chose a career and stayed in it. You chose a place to live and put down roots. You chose a partner and built a life. Not because they were wiser or more committed, but because they literally didn't have many alternatives. And let's be honest, that came with a huge cost. People stayed stuck in jobs they hated, in toxic relationships, in cities that suffocated them. So our generation broke those chains, and rightfully so. Mobility is real. Freedom is real. Possibility is real. But here's what happened. We threw out not only the chains, but also the anchors. And there's a massive difference between chains and anchors. Chains trap you against your will. Anchors hold you when you choose to stop. What we created is a world where everything floats. Nothing settles, and then comes that strange feeling of always being adrift, even when you don't want to be. Because here's an uncomfortable truth: identity needs stability. You build who you are through what remains, through the choices you uphold over time, through the bonds you maintain even when things get hard. But how do you build identity in a world where nothing is meant to last? That's the question no one is asking. Everyone is too busy optimizing, updating, improving, always moving, always transitioning. And there's something paradoxical about that. Constant motion isn't progress. Sometimes it's just motion. You know, those people who are always changing jobs, always in new relationships, always starting over, and you look at their lives and think, wow, so much is happening. But when you really think about it, nothing is actually happening. It's just change for the sake of change, because there's a difference between evolving and simply never stopping. Evolution requires time. It requires staying with something long enough to witness transformation. It requires going through the boring parts, the hard parts, the parts where you want to quit. But we've lost patience for that. Today, if something isn't amazing right away, we assume we're in the wrong place, with the wrong person, in the wrong job, and we go searching for the right one, the perfect one. Except right has become a moving target, because there's always something more right appearing on the horizon, and then you fall into that cycle. Search, find, stay for a bit, get bored or uncomfortable, search again, and again, and again. And in the end, the feeling of being replaceable comes from exactly this, because you replace yourself before anyone else even gets the chance to replace you. It's almost like a defense mechanism. I'll leave before you let me go. I'll replace you before you replace me. I'll start over before this becomes a root that will hurt to pull out. But then you look back and realize there are no roots. There are only marks of where you almost stayed, almost committed, almost built something lasting. And maybe that's why everyone feels so empty. So let's get to the point that actually matters. What do we do with all of this? Because up until now, we've only described the problem, but what about the solution? Does the solution even exist? Here's the tricky part. There's no easy answer. There's no reset button we can press to go back to the way things were. And honestly, we shouldn't even want that. But there is something we can do. And it starts with understanding one fundamental thing. You will not stop feeling replaceable by trying to prove that you aren't. This matters. So I'm going to say it another way. The anxiety of being replaceable cannot be solved by being better, faster, more productive, more interesting, because that's an endless race. There will always be someone who is more something. What helps is changing the question. Instead of asking, how do I make myself irreplaceable? The real question should be, why do I need to be irreplaceable in order to feel valuable? And that's a tough question because it touches something very deep, the need for external validation. We grew up in an era where everything turns into a metric: likes, views, followers, salary, job title, relationship status. Slowly, we internalize the idea that our value lives in these numbers, in external perception. But here's the problem: external perception is volatile. It shifts with the wind. You can be adored today and forgotten tomorrow. You can be essential now and disposable 6 months from now. So if your sense of worth depends on that, you'll always be on an emotional roller coaster. And maybe the way out is to recover something we kind of lost along the way: the ability to validate ourselves. This isn't about arrogance. It's not about not caring what anyone thinks. It's about having an internal foundation that doesn't depend on constant approval. It's about knowing who you are when no one is watching, about knowing what you value when there's no audience, about understanding what matters to you beyond performance and metrics. And here's something interesting. The people who feel the least replaceable are not the ones constantly proving their worth. They're the ones who stop trying to prove it. They do things because those things matter to them. They stay in relationships because they chose to stay, not because they're afraid they won't find another. They work well because they enjoy what they do, not because they're competing. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one. Because when you stop trying to become irreplaceable, something curious happens. You actually start to become irreplaceable. Not in the fantasy sense of no one will ever replace me, because that's impossible, but in the sense that you build something genuine, something that carries your imprint, your essence. And that can't be replicated because it's yours. But there's another side to this, and it's just as important. If you want to stop feeling replaceable, you also have to stop replacing others so easily. We can't complain about living in a disposable world while actively discarding people ourselves. So maybe it's time to ask, when was the last time you truly invested in something? When was the last time you stayed when things got hard? When you chose depth instead of variety? When was the last time you said no to a better option because you had already chosen something and were committed to it? These are the questions that actually matter, because in the end, the antidote to feeling replaceable isn't being exceptional. It's being consistent, being present, being real. And interestingly, in a world where everyone is trying to be exceptional, being genuinely present is already exceptional. It's almost like we've come full circle. The answer was there from the beginning: connection, but not superficial social media connection, real connection, the kind that requires time, vulnerability, commitment, the kind we always knew mattered, but somehow forgot how to build. So let's wrap this up with a final reflection. The feeling of being replaceable isn't just a personal issue. It's not just about you being insecure or needing to work on your self-esteem. It's a collective phenomenon. It's the result of living in a unique historical moment where the rules of the game have completely changed. And maybe the most comforting part of all this is exactly that. You're not alone. It's not paranoia. It's not weakness. It's a rational response to a world that truly operates differently now. But acknowledging this doesn't mean accepting it passively. Because here's the truth: the world may have changed, but you still have a choice. You still get to decide how to respond. You can join the frantic race to become irreplaceable through constant performance. You can live with one foot in and one foot out of everything. You can treat people as options and be treated as an option in return. Or you can choose another path. You can choose commitment over convenience, depth over variety, presence over performance. And look, it's not an easy path because it goes against everything the world is telling you. It goes against the logic of metrics, optimization, and constant upgrading. But maybe that's exactly why it's worth choosing. Because in the end, what we truly want isn't to be irreplaceable. What we want is to belong, to matter, to know that our presence makes a difference in someone's life. And that doesn't come from numbers or status or being better than others. It comes from consistent choices, from showing that you stay, from building something that takes time, from being vulnerable enough to let people truly know you. It comes from stopping seeing everything as a transaction and starting to see it as a relationship. And maybe, just maybe, if more people start making those choices, we can create small pockets of resistance against this disposable logic. Little spaces where people aren't options. They're people. Where commitment isn't naivety, it's strength. Where staying isn't failure, it's a choice. It won't change the entire world, but it will change your world. And in the end, your world is the one you live in every day. So here's the question. What kind of world do you want to build? One where you're constantly proving your worth, always anxious, always chasing the next thing? Or one where you choose a few things and truly commit to them, where you risk being vulnerable, where you grow roots even knowing that roots can hurt when they're pulled out? The answer is yours. It always has been. And maybe that's the one thing that has never been replaceable: your ability to choose. So, choose well. If this video made you think, leave a like below. It helps more people find this content. And subscribe to the channel for more reflections on the contradictions of modern life. See you in the next video.